Our goofy game phrase kept my son alive. I was 28 when my son Lucas invented what he called the superhero secret language, because he'd just watched his first Avengers movie and decided our family needed emergency codes like the heroes used. He was 6 years old with an imagination that ran wild and an obsession with anything that involved secret missions or hidden messages. I thought it was adorable when he spent an entire Saturday afternoon creating elaborate hand signals and code phrases that he insisted we all memorize for family emergencies. My wife Sarah rolled her eyes but played along because Lucas was so excited about his creation that he could barely contain himself. The system Lucas designed was surprisingly sophisticated for a first grader. Buying ice cream meant danger or something's wrong. Going to see Grandma Betty meant call for help immediately, even though we didn't have a Grandma Betty. The dog needs a bath meant I'm hurt or someone's hurting me. Mom's making spaghetti tonight meant I'm scared but can't say why openly. Dad's working late again meant I'm being taken somewhere I don't want to go. The safety phrase that meant everything was actually fine was, "Uncle Steve is coming over," referencing Sarah's brother who lived across the country and never visited unannounced. We practiced the code religiously for months because Lucas treated it like the most important game in the world. He'd slip coded phrases into dinner conversations and wait to see if Sarah and I would respond with the appropriate signals. During car rides to school, he'd test us by saying he thought we should buy ice cream later, and we'd have to prove we remembered that meant danger by asking if Uncle Steve was coming over instead. If we forgot the proper responses, Lucas would launch into elaborate explanations about how superheroes always had to be ready for emergencies and that our family needed to be prepared for anything. What started as childhood play became deadly serious just 2 months after Lucas turned 7, when our new neighbor, Mr. Patterson, moved in next door. He was in his 50s, recently divorced, and seemed overly interested in getting to know our family, especially Lucas. At first, his attention seemed harmless, just a lonely man trying to make friends in a new neighborhood. He'd wave enthusiastically whenever he saw us, offer to help with yard work, and always had candy or small toys to give Lucas whenever they crossed paths. But within weeks, Patterson's behavior began escalating in ways that made my skin crawl. He started timing his outdoor activities to coincide with Lucas playing in our backyard, finding excuses to lean over the fence and engage my son in conversations that lasted longer than appropriate. He'd ask detailed questions about Lucas's school schedule, his favorite activities, and whether he ever felt lonely when Sarah and I were at work. The questions seemed innocent individually, but together they formed a pattern that made me deeply uncomfortable. The first coded warning came during a Saturday afternoon barbecue, when Patterson invited himself over and cornered Lucas near our back gate. I was inside getting plates when Lucas burst through the kitchen door and casually mentioned he was really thinking about buying ice cream. Then he paused and added that Uncle Steve probably wasn't coming over today, but maybe we should call him anyway. The mixed signals sent chills down my spine as I realized Lucas was trying to tell me something was wrong but wasn't sure if it qualified as genuine danger. When I pressed him gently about what had happened outside, Lucas revealed that Patterson had been asking strange questions about his body and whether he'd started developing hair in private places. The neighbor had also suggested that Lucas might want to come over to his house sometime to see his collection of vintage comic books, but only when his parents weren't around because adults didn't understand how special these particular comics were. Patterson had even offered to take pictures of Lucas reading the comics so he could remember which ones were his favorites. I immediately went outside and confronted Patterson, who was still lingering by our fence despite Lucas having fled inside. When I told him his questions were inappropriate and he needed to leave my son alone, Patterson's demeanor shifted completely. His friendly mask slipped as he claimed I was overreacting to innocent neighborly conversation and that I clearly had a dirty mind to interpret his questions as anything other than caring interest in Lucas's development. He accused me of being paranoid and suggested that Lucas might have misunderstood harmless questions about school sports and growth spurts. But his defensive reaction and the way he couldn't maintain eye contact convinced me that Lucas's coded warning had been accurate. I banned Patterson from our property and told Lucas to never be alone with him. But our neighbor's behavior only escalated from there. Within days, he began what amounted to surveillance of our family, positioning himself to observe our daily routines while maintaining the pretense of normal neighborly activities. Patterson started appearing at the bus stop each morning when Lucas waited for school transportation, always with convenient excuses about checking his mailbox or walking to the corner store. He'd position himself where he could watch Lucas interacting with other children, sometimes taking pictures with his phone that he claimed were of interesting cloud formations or neighborhood landscaping. When other parents noticed his lurking behavior, Patterson would engage them in friendly conversation while keeping his eyes on Lucas, making it difficult for anyone to call out his obvious surveillance without seeming paranoid. The situation intensified when Patterson began leaving gifts in our mailbox specifically addressed to Lucas. Candy bars, comic books, small action figures, and trading cards would appear every few days, each accompanied by notes praising Lucas's intelligence, appearance, or behavior. The messages were always signed, "Your special friend, Mr. P," and included comments about how Lucas was such a handsome and mature boy who deserved nice things. When I threw the gifts away, Patterson would ask Lucas directly if he'd enjoyed them, putting my son in the uncomfortable position of having to lie or explain why he couldn't accept presents from neighbors. Lucas began using our coded language more frequently, mentioning ice cream or spaghetti whenever Patterson approached him or made him feel uncomfortable. The messages were getting more urgent, with Lucas working coded phrases into every conversation when Patterson had been around. He'd mention that the dog really needed a bath after walking past Patterson's house, or suggest that Mom should make spaghetti for dinner when he'd seen our neighbor watching him through the window. The breakthrough came when Lucas started having nightmares about Patterson breaking into our house at night and taking him away. He'd wake up screaming and run to our bedroom, then spend the entire next day casually working coded phrases into every conversation. Mom should definitely make spaghetti tonight, became his way of saying he was scared, but couldn't explain why. The dog really needs a bath meant he felt unsafe even in our own home. Maybe we should buy ice cream after school, was his plea for me to pick him up instead of letting him walk home alone, where Patterson might intercept him. I installed security cameras around our property after Lucas mentioned buying ice cream 3 times in one morning, and the footage revealed that Patterson was indeed watching our house obsessively. The cameras caught him standing in his yard at night, staring directly at Lucas's bedroom window for hours at a time. During the day, he'd approach our fence when he thought no one was home, peering into our backyard and taking pictures of areas where Lucas played. He'd positioned lawn chairs on his property to maximize his view into our house, creating what amounted to a surveillance post, disguised as an outdoor relaxation area. The recorded evidence was disturbing enough, but it got worse when I discovered Patterson had been following Lucas to school. The bus stop surveillance had escalated to him actually driving behind the school bus, parking across from the elementary school, and watching children during recess from his car. Other parents had noticed the strange man who appeared at school events and playgrounds, but he was careful to maintain enough distance that his behavior seemed creepy rather than obviously criminal. When I confronted Patterson with the video evidence of his surveillance, his friendly neighbor facade completely crumbled. He became aggressive and threatening, claiming I was harassing an innocent man who was just trying to be a positive influence in the neighborhood. He ranted about how ungrateful modern parents were for genuine community support, and how suspicious everyone had become about natural friendships between adults and children. His transformation from helpful neighbor to aggressive predator was terrifying to witness, especially knowing he'd been targeting my 7-year-old son. That's when Patterson made his first direct move. He began approaching Lucas at school, claiming to be a family friend authorized to pick him up for dental appointments or family emergencies that required immediate attention. Lucas used our coded system to alert his teacher by mentioning that his dad was working late again and asking if she thought Uncle Steve might come over instead. Thankfully, Mrs. Rodriguez had been briefed about our family's safety concerns after I'd spoken with the school administration about Patterson's behavior. Mrs. Rodriguez immediately called me while keeping Lucas in her classroom, reporting that Patterson was in the main office demanding to take my son home because of a supposed family emergency. He'd told the school secretary that Sarah had been in a car accident and was being rushed to the hospital, and that I was stuck in an important business meeting and had called him to pick up Lucas as a favor. The story was elaborate and convincing, complete with fake tears and urgent phone calls to imaginary hospitals. When I arrived at the school within 10 minutes, Patterson was still in the office arguing with administrators about his right to help neighboring families during crisis situations. He insisted that Lucas's parents had given him permission to provide emergency transportation and that the school was putting a child in danger by refusing to release him to a trusted family friend. He even produced fake text messages supposedly from me, asking him to collect Lucas due to the family emergency. The school's security cameras revealed that Patterson had been surveilling the campus for weeks, learning the daily schedules and procedures well enough to time his kidnapping attempt perfectly. He knew which doors were typically unlocked when classes ended and how to navigate the building without attracting attention from staff members who might recognize him as an unauthorized visitor. His plan had been sophisticated and patient, waiting for the perfect opportunity to take Lucas under the guise of helping with a family emergency. Police arrested Patterson immediately on charges of attempted kidnapping, but the search of his house revealed the true scope of his obsession with Lucas. They found hundreds of photographs of my son taken over several months, detailed notes about our family's daily routines, maps of Lucas's walking routes to and from school, and disturbing journals documenting Patterson's fantasies about developing a special relationship with him. The walls of his bedroom were covered with pictures of Lucas playing in our backyard, waiting for the bus, and participating in school activities. Even more disturbing was the discovery of a detailed plan for abducting Lucas, including contingencies for different scenarios and locations where he could be taken without being detected. Patterson had researched isolated cabins in nearby state forests, studied child psychology books about gaining trust and compliance, and purchased restraints, sedatives, and other materials that suggested he intended to hold Lucas captive for extended periods. The evidence indicated that the attempted school pickup was just one of several kidnapping strategies he'd been developing. The investigation also uncovered that Patterson was a registered sex offender named David Kruger, who had been living under a false identity since moving to our neighborhood. His real criminal history included child molestation convictions in 2 different states, and he'd been using forged documentation to rent homes in family-friendly neighborhoods where he could gain access to potential victims. Our case became part of a larger federal investigation into his activities across a 5-state area. During the expanded investigation, federal agents discovered that Patterson hadn't been working alone. He was part of an organized network of predators who shared information about potential victims and coordinated their activities to avoid detection by law enforcement. The network included more than 20 individuals across multiple states, all of whom specialized in targeting children from specific demographic profiles that matched Lucas's age, appearance, and family situation. FBI agents found extensive communication between Patterson and other network members discussing Lucas specifically, including photographs, personal information, and strategic discussions about the best approaches for gaining access to him. The network had been monitoring our family for months, with different members taking shifts to observe our routines and identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited for abduction attempts. They'd even researched Sarah's and my work schedules, Lucas's after-school activities, and our extended family relationships. The revelation that Lucas had been the target of an organized criminal conspiracy rather than just one disturbed neighbor was absolutely terrifying. The coded language system that had started as a childhood game had literally saved his life by allowing him to communicate danger in situations where direct communication might have made him a more appealing target. The network members had been looking for children who seemed isolated or unable to report suspicious behavior, and Lucas's ability to signal for help had marked him as too risky for their operations. With Patterson in custody, the remaining network members initially backed off, but federal investigators warned us that they might try to complete what Patterson had started. The network had invested significant time and resources in targeting Lucas, and they might view his successful escape as a challenge to their reputation and operational security. We were advised to maintain heightened security measures while the FBI worked to identify and arrest the remaining conspirators. Lucas continued using our coded language frequently during this period, indicating that he felt watched and unsafe, even with Patterson imprisoned. He'd mentioned buying ice cream when unfamiliar cars lingered near our house, suggest that the dog needed a bath when strangers asked him questions about his family, and work spaghetti references into conversations when he noticed the same person in multiple locations over several days. His vigilance proved justified when surveillance revealed that other network members were indeed continuing to monitor our family. The new threats were more sophisticated than Patterson's amateur surveillance, involving people with professional training in counter-surveillance and abduction techniques. They used different vehicles, changed their appearance regularly, and coordinated their activities to avoid creating obvious patterns that might alert law enforcement. Lucas's coded warnings were often the first indication that new operatives were in the area, allowing us to adjust our security measures and alert federal investigators to emerging threats. 3 months after Patterson's arrest, the situation escalated dramatically when Lucas failed to come home from school on schedule. He'd been walking with friends when a van pulled up beside them and 2 men attempted to grab him. Lucas managed to break free and run, but his friends were too shocked and frightened to provide useful descriptions of the attackers or their vehicle. When he finally made it home, he was using every coded phrase he could remember simultaneously, indicating maximum danger and requesting immediate help. The attempted kidnapping triggered a massive law enforcement response, with FBI agents coordinating with local police to establish protective surveillance around our family and Lucas's school. They traced the van to a rental company that had been used by known associates of Patterson's network, confirming that the attack was directly connected to our role in exposing their predatory operations. The message was clear. They intended to finish what Patterson had started, regardless of the increased law enforcement attention. Lucas was placed in protective custody while investigators worked to identify and arrest the remaining network members. The safe house was a nondescript suburban home staffed by federal marshals who specialized in protecting child witnesses and victims. Lucas stayed there for 2 weeks, communicating with Sarah and me through secure telephone lines, while agents dismantled the criminal organization that had targeted our family. Our coded language proved invaluable during this period, allowing Lucas to communicate his emotional state and immediate safety concerns without revealing sensitive information that might compromise the ongoing investigation. The separation was agonizing for all of us, especially because we couldn't be physically present to comfort Lucas during the most dangerous period of his young life. He'd use our coded phrases during supervised phone calls to let me know how he was coping with the isolation and fear, while I tried to provide reassurance and emotional support without being able to hold him or provide direct physical comfort. Sarah and I took turns making these calls, maintaining connection with Lucas, while federal agents worked around the clock to eliminate the threats against him. The federal operation culminated in coordinated raids across 7 states, resulting in the arrest of 23 individuals connected to Patterson's predatory network. Several of them were found with detailed surveillance materials about our family, including current photographs, GPS tracking data, and elaborate kidnapping plans that involved taking Lucas to a remote compound in another state. The investigation revealed that they'd been preparing for months to abduct him, viewing his capture as essential for maintaining their organization's reputation and deterring other potential witnesses from cooperating with law enforcement. During the raids, agents discovered that the network had been operating for over a decade, successfully abducting and trafficking dozens of children across the country. They'd developed sophisticated methods for identifying vulnerable targets, infiltrating communities, and executing kidnappings that left minimal evidence for law enforcement to follow. Lucas had been selected as a target not just because of his age and appearance, but because their psychological profiling suggested he would be compliant and unlikely to attempt escape once captured. The evidence seized during the raids included detailed dossiers on hundreds of children who had been identified as potential targets, with Lucas's file being among the most comprehensive. They documented his daily routines, personality traits, family relationships, and even psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited during captivity. The level of planning and research was terrifying, revealing how close they'd come to successfully executing their kidnapping plan before our coded language system disrupted their operations. With the network dismantled and its members in federal custody, Lucas was finally able to return home. But months of living under constant threat had changed him in ways that would require years of specialized therapy to address. He continued using our coded language compulsively, unable to shake the hypervigilance that had kept him alive during the crisis, but now interfered with his ability to relax and enjoy normal childhood activities. Every stranger, unusual sound, or unexpected event triggered coded warnings about potential dangers. The trauma manifested in various ways beyond the constant coded communication. Lucas developed severe anxiety about being alone, even in our own house with multiple security systems active. He couldn't sleep without checking locks and windows multiple times each night. He became suspicious of anyone who showed interest in him, including teachers, coaches, and other children's parents who tried to engage him in normal social interactions. The cheerful, outgoing 7-year-old had been replaced by a hypervigilant child who viewed the world as fundamentally dangerous. Sarah and I sought specialized therapy for children who'd experienced prolonged threats and attempted abduction, working with professionals who understood how constant danger could affect developing brains and social development. Lucas needed to learn techniques for managing hypervigilance and anxiety while gradually rebuilding his ability to trust that he was genuinely safe in normal environments. The coded language remained an important part of our family's communication, but it needed to evolve to address emotional healing rather than just physical safety concerns. The therapeutic process revealed that Lucas had internalized an enormous amount of stress and responsibility during the months when he'd been targeted by a sophisticated criminal network. He felt responsible for protecting not just himself, but our entire family, using coded communication to alert us to threats while trying to maintain some semblance of normal childhood activities and relationships. The burden of constant vigilance had been exhausting and isolating, leaving him with trauma symptoms that would require ongoing treatment and support for years to come. Recovery involved gradually expanding Lucas's comfort zone while respecting his need for safety measures and communication tools. Our coded language system remained active, but evolved to include phrases for emotional states, therapy progress, and social situations that felt overwhelming. Checking the weather became Lucas's way of saying he was having flashbacks or intrusive memories. Feeding the birds meant he was feeling overwhelmed by crowds or noise. Watering the plants indicated he needed extra reassurance about family safety and security measures. The legal proceedings against the network members were extensive, with trials spanning multiple jurisdictions and involving testimony from dozens of victims and their families. Lucas had to provide testimony about his experiences, describing how our family's coded communication system had allowed him to signal for help in situations where normal communication might have escalated the danger he faced. His composure and intelligence impressed prosecutors and judges, who noted that his ability to communicate covertly had probably prevented multiple successful kidnappings. During his testimony, Lucas demonstrated several of our coded phrases and explained how he'd learned to incorporate them into seemingly normal conversation when he felt threatened or unsafe. The jury was visibly moved by his detailed recollection of events and his ability to articulate how the coded language had functioned as a survival tool during months of surveillance and attempted abduction. Prosecutors argued that without our family's emergency communication system, Lucas would likely have been successfully kidnapped and potentially killed by the criminal network. All 23 network members received lengthy federal sentences, with several facing life imprisonment for their roles in multiple child abductions, trafficking operations, and conspiracy charges. The judge presiding over the primary trial praised Lucas's courage in testifying and noted that his family's innovative communication system had been crucial in exposing and dismantling a criminal organization that had operated undetected for years across multiple states. The media attention surrounding the case brought national recognition to the concept of family emergency communication systems, with child safety experts recommending that all families develop coded language for potential crisis situations. Lucas and I were invited to speak at conferences and workshops about developing these systems, though we were careful to protect his privacy while sharing information that might help other families protect their children from similar threats. But even with all the predators imprisoned and the network dismantled, Lucas continued struggling with the lasting effects of prolonged trauma and threat. He'd been living in a state of constant alertness for so long that normal childhood experiences felt dangerous and unpredictable. Simple activities like playing in the backyard, walking to a friend's house, or participating in school events required extensive planning and security measures that other families took for granted. The coded language that had saved Lucas's life became both a tool for healing and a reminder of the trauma he'd experienced. We worked with therapists to gradually modify the system, reducing the frequency of danger-related phrases while expanding emotional support and comfort signals. Uncle Steve is coming over evolved from meaning everything is safe to I love you and you're protected. New phrases emerged organically as Lucas processed his experiences and developed healthier coping mechanisms. Years of therapy helped Lucas develop strategies for managing anxiety and hypervigilance while maintaining appropriate awareness of genuine safety concerns. He learned to differentiate between trauma responses and actual threats, gradually rebuilding his ability to engage with the world without constant fear of abduction or harm. The process was slow and sometimes frustrating, but Lucas's resilience and intelligence helped him recover more completely than many trauma survivors his age. The experience also strengthened our family relationships in unexpected ways. Sarah and I learned to communicate more effectively about difficult topics, developed better strategies for supporting Lucas through ongoing challenges, and gained appreciation for the everyday safety and security that most families never think about. The coded language that began as childhood play had evolved into a sophisticated system for maintaining connection and providing support during the most difficult period of our lives. Today, Lucas is a teenager who still occasionally uses elements of our original coded language, though now it's more often for emotional support than emergency communication. He'll mention buying ice cream when he's having a bad day and needs extra attention, or suggest that Uncle Steve might come over when he wants reassurance about family stability and love. The system that once saved his life has become a way for him to maintain connection with his childhood while navigating the normal challenges of adolescent development. The criminal network that targeted Lucas was completely dismantled, with no known active members remaining at large. Patterson died in federal prison 2 years after his conviction, attacked by other inmates who learned about his crimes against children. The investigation and prosecution became a landmark case in federal law enforcement's approach to organized predatory networks, leading to new strategies for identifying and disrupting these operations before children could be harmed. Our goofy game phrase kept my son alive during the most dangerous months of his childhood, allowing him to communicate threats and request help in situations where normal communication might have made him a more appealing target for sophisticated predators. The coded language that began as superhero fantasy became a real-world survival tool that protected Lucas from kidnapping, trafficking, and potentially murder at the hands of a criminal organization that had successfully victimized dozens of other children.